Hi, everybody, and thank you for being here at time. I would like to start. We are holding in the middle of chapter 42, on the bottom of page 638 in Lessons of Tanya, volume 2. Just an introduction. We spoke until now, studied until now, that every person should be able to develop fear of God. The Talmud asks, is fear of God is such a minor thing that Moshe says it's a small thing? And the Talmud answers, yeah, for Moshe it's a small thing. We discovered that every Jew has a chip, a little bit of Moshe, and there is a Moshe in every generation that enables us to develop fear of God. Later on, the Rebbe goes on to say that there are two developments or two challenges that we need to go through to awaken that fear. One, just like finding a diamond in the bottom of the ocean, of the earth. A, cleaning up from the outside all the mud and all the whatever is attached to it, all this. And the B is then polishing it and working with the stone itself to shine that it should be cut or polished in a way that it will reflect the light in a beautiful way. Same is the soul. The soul sometimes gets dirty with all the bad, these inappropriate activities. We need to read that. And then we need to, as we spoke about, a piece of wood, in order for the fire to get cut on, it needs to be chopped into small pieces. And that's the idea of bitterness. And I shared with you that God tells a man, you have a choice. If you would do it to yourself, that's great. If not, somebody else will do it. If not, I'll do it. So it's not easy if it comes from the outside. But if we choose and we take it upon ourselves to deprive ourselves of pleasures, to get up early, and to spend extra time studying and doing good with others and helping others, it is in a way will break the animal soul into small pieces and the flame will be catching up to it. This is until now. In this section of the chapter, we're going to discover a few parts, but we'll conclude. Hopefully, we'll get to the point where God, the Rebbe will point out that everybody can develop fear of God, and the Rebbe will share with us that everything we study until now is, so to say, intellectual. But now we're going to get to a point where it's we need to understand how to do it, and it would be, I believe, an easy route. But before, the Rabbi is going to talk about parables in the Torah, particularly attaching human features to God. And I'm going to show it you a little bit beforehand, so when we read, you are able to connect. We read in the Torah God's wrath, God's hand, God's ears, God listens, God understands. These are human features. God has no human features. He does not have ears. He does not have a hand or the finger of God. It says in Egypt, the Jewish people saw God's finger in smiting the Egyptians. In the ocean, when God split the ocean, they saw God's hand. What do you mean they saw God's hand? God has no hands. What does it mean God will smite? God will smite. You need to have a hand to smite somebody. So the entire Torah is full with description about God's conduct that are just as if God has an image or a body. And this is one of the, against the foundation of Judaism, one of the 13 principles is God has no image and God has no body. Because a human body, it makes sense, because your body confine it to a specific area. God has no limitations, so therefore a body cannot apply. That's the first point the Rabbi will make. The second, the Rabbi will make a distinction between God and a human in the way of how we relate to others, to other entities. And then we're going to talk about basic, simple faith in God. That would lead to the fear of God that's available for everybody. Now, to answer the idea of you know what, let's read. I think it would be easy read tonight. So I'm on the bottom of page 638. And although he, God, has no bodily likeness, how then can we possibly say that God possesses an eye, an ear? God neither sleeps nor slumbers. God's eyes are always open. God, what do you mean eyes? That are part of a physical body. Says the Rebbe, on the contrary, that is, this is the very reason that everything is revealed and known to him infinitely more than, for example, through the physical medium of sight and hearing. Here is the Rebbe's the explanation of what the Rebbe is saying. When we say that God does not possess any bodily likeness, we mean that he is not bounded by the frailties and physical body. A physical eye can observe corporality but not spirituality. It can see only when there is adequate light and only up to a given distance, and so on. Physical hearing is likewise limited. God's seeing and hearing, however, possesses only the merits of these faculties but none of their physical limitations. For it goes without saying that any quality possessed by created being is truly possessed by their creator. Did you understand what we just read? Makes sense. What the rabbi is saying, if I have an eye, my eye is a physical entity. Therefore, it's limited to certain limitations. I can see only at daylight, when there is light. I can only see up to the wall, but if there is a barrier, there are curtain, I cannot see beyond. Same is about hearing. I can hear so much. I cannot hear mixed voices. I cannot hear very, very far. God has no limitation of a body. So when we say so on both ways, first, he's not limited to a body, and therefore, when we say he can see, he doesn't have to have the conditions that are fit for vision. He can see it very far. He can see behind mountains and homes, and there is no such thing as limiting or stopping the vision. The same is about hearing.
So that anthropomorphism.
Anthropomorphism.
Qualities of lifelike things to someone that
is not bounded by the boundaries. But the Rebbe is going to say one more thing to make it easy for us. By way of illustration, the Rebbe is going to use an illustration. God's seeing and hearing and the fact that everything is revealed to him and known to him are like a man who knows and feels within himself all that is happening to and being experienced by each of his 248 organs, such as cold and heat, feeling even the heat in his toenails, for example, as when he is scorched by fire. So also the essence and substance. Did you understand that? Do I have to see my toenail to know that it's in pain, that it's in heat, that there is an infection? You don't need to look. You just sense that. If you don't sense that, there is a disconnect between the toenail, or the toe finger and the person. I don't need to see what's going on inside of me. I feel full if I ate dinner. I feel hungry. I don't need to look inside. I don't need a stethoscope to look inside and to tell me, oh, my digestive system is just emptied out and now I'm ready for more food. It's a sense that we have because I know myself very well. The idea of seeing or knowing what's going on in my body is different than knowing what's going on in your body or you, because I need to use my eyes, my ears, and my knowledge. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to tell. When it comes to myself, you don't need all that. Says the Rebbe, God is everywhere. So it's all part of God. If it's part of God, you don't need the eye to see something because the eye can help you see an entity that's outside of itself. Does it make sense, Ali?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Says the Rebbe, and all that is affected in or by them is known to the person and sensed in his brain. If you get a clap, if you get someone punches you fingers or your face, you know exactly how it feels, you know exactly what happened. Nobody has to describe to you what happened. Nobody, because you feel it. It's part of you, and therefore I don't have to look outside of you to see it because it's who you are. Says the Rebbe, he is not affected by the existence, the essence of being of the world. None of them affect any change in him, God forbid, nor in his absolute unity, just as he was one and unified before he created them, so too does he remain one and unified after their creation. So therefore, when God created human beings, created universes, he's still one, meaning it's part of God. If it's part of God, it does not have to see with the eye what is going on. He knows what's going on because it's part of who God is. In order to help us understand this well with our intelligence, the scholars of truth, that is, the Kabbalists, have already treated it at length in their books, and an explanation will be found there. The rabbi wants to tell us that he's not going to go into a philosophical discussion. How is it possible, if God knows everything that goes on and God is everywhere, how is it possible that I have a choice? If I have a choice, meaning free choice, ultimate free choice, it means no one else knows how I will conduct myself. If someone knows before and how I will choose tomorrow, you cannot call it you cannot call it the free choice because it's not free anymore. I'm already bound by the knowledge of someone before that knew exactly. Says the Rebbe, this is not the topic to discuss here. Rambam, Maimonides has a whole lengthy discussion over that. The Kabbalists are discussing it over books and books and books. There are many, many ways to explain it. Bottom line, the Rebbe is saying this is a topic that is very well clarified. All we need to know is nothing is outside of God. And therefore, when God says he knows or he sees or the eye of God, it's figuratively for us as created beings, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to connect to the relationship with God at that moment. But from God's point of view, there is no such thing. I hope I made myself clear. However, page 642, right in the middle. However, all Jews, as descendants of our patriarchs who believed in God, are believers, descendants of believers, without any speculation of mortal intellect whatsoever, and they declare, you were the same before the world was created, and so forth. We make a declaration every morning. You are before the world was created, you are after the world was created, all is one. What we mean to say is that no matter what we do, what we choose, how we conduct ourselves, it has no impact on God, because it's all part of God. And therefore, when we say God is angry at us or God is extremely pleased, it means that at the moment I connect to God in the way of two human beings that are angry at each other. When we don't receive a blessing, God forbid, or a curse, God is angry at the moment. God is not changed. He's never getting angry. What we say is that my connection to God at that moment is on that level, but God is the same, doesn't change, does not get angry, does not get happy. It applies only to a human with a body, but an entity that has no body, it doesn't apply. How come we say God's eye? How come we say God's hand? It's all the way we relate to God's behavior or conduct towards us at the moment. I hope I made myself clear. These are topics that are very, very deep. It's been explained above in chapter 20. Now, here is the Rebbe. Wants to tell us that to have fear of God, it is within reach of every Jewish person, because we are possessing this chip of Moshe, remember we spoke about? And therefore all we need is to know that the requirement for us is to concentrate about God's greatness. All we need is the most basic of fear of God. We don't need to have a fear of an embarrassment in front of the greatest of all, the God. That's a much higher level of fear, as we discussed before. All we need is to know that when we sin, we will pay for it. And for that, all we need is to concentrate for a moment, realizing that it's God is watching, and God is recording, and God is going to come back and say, why did you do it? And as soon as we concentrate, it will certainly lead to the point of conducting ourselves properly. That's the fear that Moshe says is easy for you. And that's the Rebbe's now conclusion. Again, what the Rebbe is saying, after all that we spoke, we need to understand that when Moshe said, God is asking only for fear, he is asking you to concentrate on God's greatness and God's watchful eye, and God will record everything that's happening, and therefore you cannot hide, and you cannot say, nobody watches me, and realize the payment will come afterwards in a positive or the opposite. And that will lead, God guarantees it will lead to the proper conduct. Therefore, it should be easy for every human being. You don't need to be a great scholar. You don't need to have lots of Torah knowledge. You don't need to be able to concentrate all day. It's a simple concentration that will lead to that point. If someone says, but it does not develop a fear of God by me, says the Rebbe, as we'll see in a moment, that the mitzvah is, of when we say to fear God, is to concentrate on that moment and think about it. If it didn't lead to the actual fear, do it again tomorrow, do it again over. It will eventually get you there.
Doesn't the soul give an accounting each day?
Yes. But it doesn't help
No, but
because people don't think about it. What the Rebbe is saying is, concentrate that God is watching. Of course, it's easy also if you know that at the end of the day, you're going to give a full account of what happened during the day. And how will you answer? So that's part of the contemplation, the meditation. Yes, Jim, did you?
Like fear, it's awe and reverence. Not like
Reverence and respect rather than fear of punishment. Says the Rebbe, here is the Rebbe's words. Now, therefore, each individual Jew, whoever he may be, that is, whatever his spiritual state, when he ponders upon this for considerable time each day, how God is truly omnipresent in the higher and lower worlds, and that the actual heaven and earth, that is, not only the spiritual heaven and earth, the supernal spherot, but the actual heaven and earth itself is truly filled with His glory. God is everywhere, and that He looks, seeks, and searches His kidneys and heart, that is, His inner thoughts and emotions. In other words, God knows what's going on. The body does not hide my thoughts or my feeling. And all His actions and words, and counts His every step. He knows exactly every step, what we do, where we do, how we do, and why we do. Then fear will be implemented in his heart throughout the day, even when he is occupied with other matters and cannot contemplate the above, when he will again meditate on this, even with a superficial reflection that does not demand a particular effort and a set time. At any time or moment, he will thus turn away from evil and do good. That is, he will refrain from transgressing negative commands and perform positive commands in thought, speech, and deeds, so as not to rebel, God forbid, in the sight of His glory, whereof the whole world is filled. As Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, as I'll share with you in a moment, I want to share with you something that I took upon myself. As human beings, we all face challenges. I don't know if you face great challenges. I am tempted many times. And in the last maybe 10, 15 years, I contemplate on the idea that there is a camera. I feel that there is a camera. I imagine there is a camera everywhere I go. So even in the car, when I drive, the way I speak on the phone, what I think, I say to myself, there is a camera here. Just like in this building, there is a camera here, there is a camera there, there is a camera outside. They can see everything that goes on. There is a camera everywhere we go that records not just my action, but my speech and my thoughts. And therefore, even if you speak and you speak in a low voice, it does not mean that it's not going to get recorded. And in fact, today, I think I shared with you, I read many years back, that scientists say, just like we have sound waves was discovered when? 100 years ago? When megaphone came up, right? So it's 100 years ago. Up to that point, there was no such thing as sound waves. Today, I can be speaking here, and someone in Australia can listen to me by the sound waves. If they have a radio with a short waves, they can get to, right? It's all the same. Yes or no, Ali? Why are you looking at me?
Haven't thought of a shortwave radio in a long time.
But there is such a thing. I can have a transistor, I can have a radio, and someone speaks no internet, just sound waves. They're everywhere.
It's called a ham.
A ham radio,
Yes, sir.
we call it a transistor, a small, and you can, based on the channels, where is the voice coming from? The sound waves. It's not going to plugged into the. They say that all our voices, all our sounds is up in the air. And one day there will be a tool that will be able, you'll be able to point and be able to hear the voices of other people from the past throughout the history of the universe. Just like before sound waves was created, nobody ever imagined such a thing. It was discovered, I don't know how it was discovered. But today, if I take someone from 200 years ago and I say to him, I can speak now, and someone in the middle of the ocean on a ship, or someone in Australia or in Israel can hear what I say, they would be shocked. There is such thing that all, and by the way, in Kabbalah, we are told that Mashiach will come, the stones, the rocks will come screaming and say, why did you step on me while you are uttering words of the opposite of a blessing? The prophet says, Even mikir tizak. The rocks from the walls will be the one to testify what we said and what we did.
The wall.
Huh?
The walls.
Even a stone mikir from the wall, rocks from the wall. And we are told that the stones that we step on, rocks we step on, will turn to us. In other words, they will come and bring back everything I said throughout my life and say, this is what you did while you were using me, using my, and why did you do it? Who gave you permission? So when we contemplate on that, it helps us do what's right. And here is the rabbi is saying, this then is the meaning of the verse, God demands of you. I'm sorry, I skipped one. This is in accord with the statement of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to his disciples quoted above. Vis-a-vis, may it be God's will that the fear of heaven be upon you and keep you from sinning, like the fear of a human being, who by observing your actions keep you from sinning. Did we discuss that? On his deathbed, he turned to them and he says, may the fear of heaven, God fear, upon you be like the fear of policemen. And they said to him, Rabbi, what, you're trying to tell us that we don't fear God? And he says, yeah, whenever you are hiding in a room, you say, nobody sees me, I don't have to worry. But if there is a man in the room, you speak differently, you act differently, you refrain from acting inappropriately. Just realize God is there just like a human being. May God's fear be as if there is a human being present. And that will help us do what's right. The Lubavitcher Rebbe once turned to his driver, Rabbi Krinsky, and says to him, I see that you're very careful in your driving, watching that there should not be a policeman, right? May you fear God just like you fear the police.
There was a study a few years ago, or many years ago, I don't know, but just what you're saying in the operating room, what I read in a hospital where a lot of times they were talking and they thought the patient couldn't hear them. And it was causing a lot of problems for the patient, even though they were, but then they had cameras and they changed their way of talking and everything, they improved, the patients got better.
Wow.
It was, so yeah, there was actually a study where they were trying to improve the operating rooms with cameras.
And because they installed cameras,
Yeah, because
the doctors and the nurses are more respectful,
Yes.
and it helps the patient.
People
Wow.
are caught talking, you see the microphones are off.
Right.
Yeah,
I say many things I wish they hadn't said.
right.
Hot,
Right.
hot mic,
What?
hot
but-
mic.
Yeah.
And you're calling it hot mic.
So we need to get used to the idea there is a mic everywhere all the time. In the shower, in the pool, in the car. It doesn't matter where and how.
Intelligence, that's not really so far off.
It's exactly.
But it's
Today.
it's amazing, you look something up, and the next thing you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it shows up on your TV. I mean, it's the next commercial.
Right.
If you look up like a pair of shoes, then all of a sudden the advertisement for the shoes on your TV, I'm like, really?
It's beyond.
It's beyond.
It's crazy, you know. Very true. So that's what the,
Place, you know, like on a spam call and use your voice, and you've all read this, you can use your voice to
People are being scammed at.
correct, call a relative, and if they were voice saying, I'm in prison, and you're the only person who can help me, I need $5,000.
Yeah.
And from just like little bit.
today they can impersonate you.
Yeah.
Right.
ARP, last magazine, tells you all about the scams.
Right.
I just want to share my experience that when I search on my computer, on my phone book, on my phone app, a name, then I go into, I have a name, the AC broke, for example. So I looked for my AC guy. I didn't remember the name, so I put cooling, AC cooling. I typed the word cooling in my phone app, in my address book, and it came up. So I go now to the Google and I tap in the name of the company. Before I just started AC cooling, he already came in with the guy and his phone number. I said to myself, how did he figure that that's the guy I was looking? He saw that I was looking at the address book, and it gets more and more. Well, maybe it's a blessing, but we got to be careful, got to be aware. The idea is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai already blessed his students on his deathbed with this type of blessing. He says, realize that God is just like another human being that you can see in front of you, and he watches and writes down everything you do and what you say and how you conduct yourself. Says the Rebbe, if I contemplate on that every day, now I'm not a tzaddik, to just a disclaimer, I don't always do the right thing. But if we sit and spend time every day contemplating that God is there, here, watches, no matter how dark the room, no matter how many walls are between me and other people, that will create a fear, a most basic fear of God, meaning refrain from sinning in front of God. You don't want to sin. You don't want to raise your voice. You don't want to say something. You don't want to cheat. You don't want to do something that's inappropriate. And this is, you following, Ali?
What page you gotta read to that?
I'm not picking on you. You're the most quiet guy, so. This then is the meaning of the verse. God demands of you only to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways. The question arises, is attaining the fear of God such an easy thing that the verse says only to fear him, as if it's so easy to do? The answer which is given for Moses, it is a simple matter. It's difficult to comprehend, for the verse speaks of what God demands of you, of every Jew. Remember, this was the question we started, the beginning of the chapter. The explanation is as follows. The verse is referring here to a level of fear which is indeed simple for every Jew to reach, that level being fear that leads one to walk in all his ways. Says Rabbi, we're talking about the most basic fear. Just realize whatever you do, you will give an account. You will have to be responsible. You cannot say no one watches.
But we get back to what we learned a while ago, that Moshe's in all of us.
In other words, in addition to what we study, there is a Moshe in all of us, that we need to break the evil inclination. Everything we study. Now the Rebbe says there is a much simpler way. Just realize, contemplate every day a couple minutes that God is part of everywhere and everything, and He's not limited to, it's not bound by physical limitations like the eye sees only up to when there is a curtain, and God can see also in total darkness, and therefore He's watching all the time. Contemplating once didn't help, twice, 3 times, every day, a little bit, it will end up guarding us and making sure we do what's right. For this is the fear that leads to the fulfillment of God's commandment, which involves turning away from evil and doing good. This is the lower level of fear which has been discussed earlier. Accordingly, the Gemara, just a minute, I just want to share with you, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe once addressed a letter to a person with the title to the Mr. such and such, a God-fearing person. This was a very normal title the Rebbe would address people, God-fearing. And one Rebbe or a famous rabbi once visited the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, and says, how can you say God-fearing? You tell the truth, right? If you tell the truth, you shouldn't call him a God-fearing person. This man is not God-fearing. He was well known as publicly violating Jewish law. And the Rebbe said to him, every single Jew is a God-fearing Jew. It's not a stage you need to reach. You're created with that. It's easy to achieve. It exists with every Jew. And that's the idea we need to understand. So everything we study until now is contemplation and realizing we possess and we are able to. And even though Moshe, it's easy for him, there is a chip of Moshe in each one of us. And there is a Moshe in every generation, in every community to assist. All that we studied is great. But now the Rebbe says we can just push aside everything, realize God is watching, just like another human being right in front of us. And I appreciate what Linda just brought up, that in the operating room, as soon as we do acknowledge that God is watching, it affects everything we get involved with. We do it right. We do it better. Accordingly, the Gemara's answer for Moses, it is simple matter, is now understandable. It means, as it applies to Moshe, that is, so to say, in relation to the quality of that is in the divine soul of every Jew. Remember, we said that Moshe is Da'at. We spoke very lengthy that there are 3 faculties in intellect, Chochmah, Bina, Da'at. Da'at is the actualization, and Moshe is the Da'at of every Jew. Says the Rebbe, that's what it means. For Moshe, it's easy. The Moshe that exists within me, which is Da'at. As soon as I put my head into contemplating, God is watching. It will become easy. This quality, being the quality of Moses, found within you, within each Jewish soul, this is indeed a minor thing, as has been stated above, that when a Jew reflects with his dot upon matters that arouse a fear of God, he will surely succeed in attaining it. For that, the faculty which connects the hidden understanding of the heart with the revelation in actual thought as is known to the students of Kabbalah. As mentioned earlier, all Jews possess a hidden treasure of fear and of heaven in their hearts. Through the faculty of that, this fear of heaven is revealed and felt in one's thought and also affects his speech and action. I hope this is clear. Ali, can I ask you, did you understand?
Would it help if I said, no, you can't ask?
Then I'll have to repeat.
No, you can't ask.
So the Rebbe is saying that's the idea of the Gemara. In other words, whenever the Rebbe gives an explanation, he goes back and fits it within the words of the Talmud. The Talmud says fear of God. How can God says, I only ask of you to fear God? It's not so easy. And so the Gemara, for Moshe, it's easy. And the Rebbe is asking, like many other commentators, Moshe, we're not talking about Moshe, we're talking about every Jew. And the Rebbe explains, the idea of Moshe that exists within us is that acknowledgement, knowledge, application. As soon as we awaken this part of us and contemplate on God being everywhere without any boundaries of a physical limitation, then it will create at least the most basic fear for conducting ourselves in a proper way. The Rebbe, I just want to interject here that the Rebbe was a great advocate about a moment of silence in public schools. Unfortunately, many liberal Jews are anti, and I don't know if it's politically incorrect, I apologize. But the Rebbe explained that when you remove God from a human being, what happens? You are creating a jungle because they become their own God. And therefore they're entitled to everything and they can do whatever they want. But what if they have God in their life? They have to answer to God. They have a mission. They have to follow a set of ethics. That will stop them and get their energies and hormones directed in the right way. Therefore, the Rebbe says, as soon as you took God out of a child, all the trouble began. So the Rebbe says, we're not here to proselytize. We're not here to convince someone to change their religion. Whatever people believe in God is fine. So therefore, the Rebbe was an advocate of a moment of silence. Every morning, you start the day in schools where you are quiet. So the teacher is not able to tell the children about what he believes in. It should be forbidden because there should not be any religion in the school. It should be a total separation of church and state. But a child should be told at home which God he should think about. And if someone is an atheist, let them think about the ocean. They don't have to answer what God they are thinking about. And unfortunately, people who are so fearful of God were fighting it and fighting it. Now things are changing. In the state of Florida, they have a law, and it applies in many other states, of a moment to start the day with a moment of silence. And again, it's not about convincing someone to believe in God. If someone grows up in a home of an atheist, which I think is very wrong, but I'm not here to try and convince the child to change and disrespect his parents. Let his parents, he or she, get from his parents what they want to do in the moment that they get to contemplate about God. But it will definitely have an impact. Just like Linda is saying that you put a camera, when there is a camera, everybody is conducting themselves totally different. For children, it's 10 times as much. And unfortunately, if anyone involved with youth today will tell you that melodies that affect the youth is not just in numbers, but the type is unheard of. It's unfortunate. And this little thing can make a big change. In describing, okay, let's continue a little more. In describing earlier the fear a Jew should possess for God, the Alter Rebbe said that it should be similar to the fear felt when one stands before a king, for God is omnipresent and observes all men's actions. A question arises. When one stands before a king, he is not only being seen by the king, but he is also looking at him. And this helps them to stand in fear of him. In the analogy, however, this is not the case. Though God, the king, sees him, he fails to see God. In other words, the Rebbe says you should contemplate God is watching, God is there. That's true, God is watching over us. But if I stand before a king, I also watch the king, I see the king, and that evokes great, deep respect and awe. I don't see God. We don't see God. If we don't see God, how will we be able to relate to God and create fear and awe of God? The Alter Rebbe will now respond to this question by saying that there is yet another means by which an individual may awaken within himself the fear of God by being able to see the King. For by observing heaven and earth and all the created beings that inhabit them, and realizing that they all derive their life from God, he will have fear of him. Here is the Rebbe's word. More so, he should remember, says the Rebbe, in addition to this, one should remember that, as in the case of mortal king, the fear of him relates mainly to his inner essence and vitality and not to his body. For when he is asleep, though his body does not change, there is no fear of him. Says the Rebbe, when I have respect or fear of the king, is not his body, it's not his garments, it's not his clothes or the crown, it's the body. That's why when the king is sleeping, the fear of the king, when I'm in front of the king and he's asleep, is totally different. This is because while he sleeps, his inner essence and vitality are in a state of concealment. Clearly then, they are the main reason for fearing a king while he's awake. And surely his inner essence and vitality are not perceived by physical eyes, but only by the mind's eye. Through the physical eyes, beholding his body and garments, and knowing that his vitality is clothed in them. This in turn leads to the beholder to fear him. And if this is so, I hope you understand, you may disagree with that, but that's the way it was with kings. When you see a king, there is a dread and fear in front of the king. That exists only when he's awakened. If he's asleep, people will have much less respect. All they fear is maybe the king will awaken. But if the king is for sure asleep, nobody fears, nobody is afraid of. Therefore, the fear of a king is not the garments or not the body. It's the essence, the inner essence of the king. Says the Rebbe. And if this is so, then surely in the analogy as well, not only is the king seeing him, but he is seen by the king as well, and this causes them to fear God. Moreover, he must truly likewise fear God when gazing with his physical eyes at the heavens and the earth and all the host wherein is clothed the infinite light of the blessed Ein Sof that emanates them. So I'm skipping, says the Rebbe, even though, and although, I'm page 648 towards the bottom, and although many garments are involved in this vestiture, so that when one gazes at created beings, one does not perceive that they are but garments to the divine life force. Says Rebbe, there is no difference or distinction at all in the fear of a mortal king, whether he be naked or clothed in one or many garments. Let me just explain. And maybe I should share an introduction to it. The Rebbe is saying the following. If I want to create, by the way, what I'm sharing is not Kabbalah, but Kabbalah explained it so beautifully. It's in the Torah. The Torah tells us, Shema. Everybody heard the word Shema? Shema means hear, right? But Shema is an acronym made out of 3 letters, Shin, Mem, Ayin, which translate to Se'u, lift up, Marom, up high, Einechem, you eyes. Lift up your eyes and see God. Every time we want to see God, we look up to the sky. We do like that. Why do we do like that? Because God is up high. What do we call the sky? Heavens. God is there. God is not there. God is everywhere. As soon as you say God is there, you put a limitation to God. Remember, one of the main foundations in Judaism is that God has no limitations. Therefore, he's not in the heavens. He's in earth, and the heavens are all alike. But every time you look up, you see the purity of the universe. And you turn and you say, this is God. The problem is that that's the God that is clothed with many, many layers of garments. It's just like when you stand before the king and the king is wearing a shirt and a vest and a jacket and a winter coat. And he's sitting on a chair in a car or something, just looking at the king or touching the king's hand, it feels like touching the king. Even though it is covered, the body of the king is covered with many, many garments. It does not take away from the relationship and the respect that I have of the being in the presence of the king. How do I find God? Looking at you, looking at every human being, looking at the sky, That's why synagogue, the Torah tells us that every synagogue that's built should have windows in the front. Anybody knew that? No. That's why if you live in traditional homes, you own traditional synagogues. You know, a lot of synagogues in basements, but anytime you build a synagogue, there are many, many requirements. It's not required like a sin if you don't have it, but it's the proper way to build, to put windows. How many windows? Harry, do you know? 12 windows representing the 12 tribes, because each tribe has a different channel to connect to God. You heard that, right? Like the menorah's branches, that's the nusach. That's why there are different ways, because each tribe follow a different version. So usually you will try to have 12 windows in the front of the synagogue. If you don't believe me, open up Code of Law. Code of Law says that when you pray in a synagogue, now what's the reason? So when you lift up your eyes, you see the sky, and the sky represents God. These are the words in Code of Law. In other words, where are the windows? It's a good question. Help me get there. Help me get there.
That's building, that's.
Of course.
You're going to put some holes in the walls and get some more.
Thank you. You're very smart. He's the best advisor. I actually counted the windows here, and I think I came up with 12 windows. But anyway, we go back to our discussion. Yes.
Reading wellness and aging and things like that. And I read an article fairly recently that one of the things that to have wellness in your life and to age well is every day find something that you would say, wow, that's awesome.
Of course.
So yeah, of course. So like if I'm walking the dog in the morning and the sun is rising and there's birds, and I mean it's beautiful, it's awesome. But it's really exactly on page 645.
That's the rabbi was talking about. Oh.
Nature.
Right,
It is. So it's
right
really
on
that
target.
it's awesome.
Right on
Yeah, it's
target.
awesome. God created this.
You're right on target.
So
But
it's-
I'm using the heavens because I want to show you a story, and then I have another story to your point. The fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Maharash, Rabbi Shmuel, there was a young man that was a businessman. He was a Uber driver with horses. And the Rebbe says to him, you can find God much easily than anybody else. And he says, how come? I'm not in the Bet Medrash. I'm not studying Torah all day. And the Rebbe says, when you're on the road, all you have to do is lift up your eye and you see God. You look at the sky, you look at nature, but you look up at the sky and you see God and you say, who created all that? God. And God is part of it. So you're standing in front of God. And the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, the grandson of that Rebbe, the sixth Rebbe, says in his memoirs that 62 years later, that man was 90 years old. So I figured he was 28 when he was told. 90 years old man came to me, to the Rebbe, to the previous Rebbe, and says, that's what your grandfather told me. And therefore, when I retired, I made sure I do not live in a house without front tall windows. So when I wake up, I can always look up the sky. And he says that he went into a kind of a nursing home, an assisted living place, and he made sure that he goes into a place where he can always, from his bedroom, see the sky. And the Rebbe says he said it, he was 90 years old. He was told 62 years earlier, and he said it with such vivid energy as if it gave him life, physical life. And this is very true. I am a big believer today. Every discovery, every research will tell you that nature, just like you said. I want to show you a story. Somebody, it's a little bit related to family of my wife. my wife Sarah's grandfather was a famous Chassid and rabbi that lived in Jerusalem, It doesn't matter how. Somebody, one of my relatives sent me a PDF of a booklet that was published by a rabbi in Bnei Brak that's not a Chassid, anti-Chassid. But he was very influenced by my grandfather, and he wrote many stories. So I wanted to read it. After he writes about stories of my grandfather, he started writing about his neighbor. Who is the neighbor? The neighbor is Sarah's grandfather, Rabbi Baruch Shifrin. The first story he reads is that they lived in an apartment in Jerusalem. You don't have private homes, or you can afford it. They lived in an apartment. He lived on the second story, and the grandfather of Sarah. And one day, he came out of his apartment, and he was very angry. So this rabbi turned to the other rabbi, to the Chabad Chassid, and says, "Why are you so angry?" And he said, "Let me take you and show you." And he takes me, that's what it says, he takes me to his home outside his porch. And he says, "You see, there was a tree here, a tree bordering between two apartments. And yesterday the neighbor cut the tree down because it was in his backyard. And every morning when I wake up, wash hands, and I say my morning blessings in the porch while I enjoy the birds chirping from the tree. Now that he took the tree, I will never in my life forgive him anymore for that." That's what he writes. A testimony for a man. I have it written. In other words, I said to myself, this is a Chassid who sat in jail. There are many other stories there about how difficult life he went through in Russia. He wasn't a simple Jew. He was a real devoted Chassid. But the fact that he cannot pray now with the sound of birds chirping in the morning bothered him to his core. So you can't call it a luxury or fancy lifestyle. This is the way to connect to God. We connect to God through nature. So birds chirping and nature is what brings completion to our identity. So the rabbi is talking about God. The rabbi is saying, and I'm going to share it very, very quickly so we can run and finish the chapter today with God's help. Rabbi is saying that just like a king, does it matter how many layers of garments does he wear when you see him or shake his hands? It doesn't matter. What if he wears gloves and you shook his hands? Does it mean you didn't shake his hands? Of course you did. Garments does not detract from the greatness of the king. But if the king is asleep, his essence is gone. Therefore, there is no fear, there is no respect for the king. Says Rabbi, God, you can see God. Of course you can see God. You know where? You look at another human being, you see God. You look at nature, you see God. You look at the heavens, you look at the sky, you see God. That's why Shema, the most famous, the holiest verse in the Torah, begins with lift up your eyes and look upstairs, look up. You can see the beauty of God. And therefore, every time you go outside and take a moment to contemplate and say how beautiful, and you find beauty within nature, you not only enjoy it, it brings God to you. You see God, because God created it all. And that's exactly what let's continue reading without the commentary of the rabbi. Says the Rebbe, 649 on top. The essential thing, however, is the training to habituate one's mind and thought continuously so that it always remain imprinted in his heart and mind that everything one sees with his eyes, the heavens and earth and all they contain, constitute the outer garments of the King, the Holy One, blessed be He. Everything I must see, I see an alligator, I see an eagle, I see everything, a dog. It's God's garments. God clothes itself and is sharing with us that beauty. Therefore, we must appreciate it, must thank God for it, and see God through everything that exists. In this way, he will constantly remember the inwardness and vitality, which is godliness. This will create within him a fear of God. Let's continue. This is page 650. This is also implicit in the word emunah, faith, which is a term indicating training to which a person habituates himself like a craftsman who trains his hands and so forth. The Rabbi, this is a very powerful point, but I'm just going to show very briefly. How do you say faith in Hebrew? Emunah. I believe. How do you say I believe? Ani ma'amin. Do you know that the word emunah also means repetitiveness, repetition, over and over? How do you say a craftsman? Aman. Vayhi yadav emunah ad bo hashemesh. He held his hand, emunah, faithfulness, with continuous. So how do you say, if I want to say a trained professional electrician, a trained artist that can put beauty on a canvas, we call him aman. Aman. Anybody heard, Harry, did you hear that word before? Okay. It's the most basic word in Hebrew. Okay? Aman. In other words, it refers to someone who has mastered a certain activity. So you have a man charash, a trained profession in the wood crafts. You have a man tzayar. Tzayar is a painter. The word aman is a craftsman. Aleph mem nun. Just a man. Like a man. Yeah, exactly. A man. You read in the Torah about the building of the first temple that King Solomon hired amanim. Amanim means craftsmen that knew how to hew the stones. And the word aman is the most basic. In other words, says the Rabbi, you know how you achieve faith in God? By actually repeating over and over the contemplation. There's no magic. You can't just turn the button and the car turns on. You have to continuously bring that into the mind. The Rebbe notes that who trains his hands means he is cognizant of the craft in his soul. He has natural talent for it, but needs only to train his hands so that it will find tangible expression in his actions, be it through art or fashioning vessels and the like. Thus, the analogy contains both aspects. The king sees the individual and he sees the king. As it were, by looking at created beings and perceiving through them the divine life force, and that vitalizes them. So the Rabbi is talking about realize God is watching you. Also find God, see God. Where do you see God? Know that God is everywhere. Another human being, another animal, another tree, whatever beauty that we find that talks to us, and we need to develop it. And to have faith in God, it means to keep training ourselves, knowing we have the talent, but we have to bring it to the fore. We discussed it 2 weeks ago that every great talent in the sports had to repeat itself, train how many? 10,000 times we spoke about, an average 10,000? Huh? 10,000 hours, thank you. And that's when they become professionals. We have that, but we need to put the hours. There should also be, we're about to finish, there should also be constant remembrance. It is constant because it does not depend on prior contemplation, but rather on pure faith of the dictum of our sages, of blessed memory, acceptance of the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, which parallels the injunction, you shall appoint a king, that is God over you, as has been explained elsewhere, and so on. What the Rabbi is saying is, just like appointing a king, you have no say over the matter. Once the people appointed a king, he's for life. If he is only for a term, that's not a true king. If the king comes up with a new rule, no one can live in this area. I need to build a road over here. I need a stable right in this area. Your house is gone. There is no saying that you cannot argue with a king. You can argue with a mayor. You can argue with a senator. You cannot argue with the king. God is a king, not a senator, not a president, not being elected. And therefore, we need to accept that God's yoke should be part of the way we serve God. For God blessed be he foregoes the creatures of the higher and lower worlds, that is, they are not the ultimate intent of creation, and uniquely bestows his kingdom upon us, and we accept the heavenly yoke. Every Rosh Hashanah we turn to God and says, be our king. And this is the significance of the obeisance in the prayer of the 18 benedictions following the verbal acceptance of the yoke of the kingdom and of heaven in the reading of Shema, when we say the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, and so on. Why we say God, we say the Amidah, we accept God as our king. In other words, every morning we make a statement, God, you are my king. If God is my king, whatever rules he makes, he doesn't have to explain to me. So why did God do this? Why is God doing it that way? He's the king. He does not need to give an accounting. He does not need to answer our questions. Whereby one accepted once again in actual deed and so on, for by vowing in the course of the prayer of the Amidah, one shows one's acceptance in actual deed of one's self-nullification to God, as is explained elsewhere. And that concludes chapter 42 for us. So again, we have discovered that fear of God is only, God is only asking us to fear God because we're asking for the most basic, knowing that there is a Moshe in us, that application in the intellect, and that Moshe, when we bring to the fore, when we contemplate, is sufficient to bring the most basic fear. Now one can ask, I cannot see the king. God sees me, but I cannot see the king. Says Rabbi, you can find God. Where you find God? Anywhere you go. Just look around, you'll find God. Once you understand that and then realize that God does not have to answer my questions and God's decision is final, then we accept God's yoke. We say Shema, we accept God as our king. And then we say the Amidah. The Amidah is the actualization of God as the king, and I am serving him. And next week we'll continue to check chapter number 43. Thank you so much, everybody.